from how stupid that was. 5 minutes adjusting. And
You just ended up
like literally just reverted back to my original position. Okay, we're short on time, so let's skip the but first and the blah blah. We had a big convo already where we're trying to struggle and
to fit this.
Okay, so let's go.
You're listening to What Brings You In, a weekly series featuring psychology talk with therapists Ryan and Carrie. Have something to say? Want your question answered? Visit ryananswers.com/podcast to get in touch.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about boundaries. It's a big one, important to everybody. This word gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? What is a boundary? I would say it's like a filter to keep the crap out of your life.
I would say it's your personal space, be it space psychological, be it physical, be it economical, any sort of space that you need to protect from others.
Okay. Give me an example. Let's talk examples here.
Boundaries around how you and your family interact. So are my in-laws allowed to come anytime they want? Do they have to call me and tell me they're coming? Do we have to have a planned event for them to come? If they come, am I cooking everything, or are we kind of sharing it? Like how does
the drop by?
How does the drop by of my in-laws
That's a big one.
That's a boundary.
Yeah,
right?
like around here there are a lot of Italian families, and one thing really common in their culture is just pop by whenever.
In Latin.
Right?
That's in Spanish culture too, yeah.
Yeah, where you just, you know what, we're close, we live nearby, we just popped in, and then usually wife is going like, how do I don't want to offend your mother-in-law or my mother-in-law, but
I got things to do, got places to be.
Or she comes over and she kind of like criticizes me and the way I run my house, and I don't know what to do about it. It's really bothering me. Or even
your personal mother, like if my mom comes to my house, she starts fixing my house.
Could be
She's like,
one.
let me put the flowers go here, Carrie, or this should be here, and she just moves crap all over the place, and I have to move it back.
Come on,
it's my house.
What are you doing?
So boundaries with your family, boundaries with your family-in-law.
Same with friends is another good one too.
Friends is another good one too.
Like friends borrowing money or friends drinking too much at your party. So we're talking about boundaries in the sense that
what behaviors do I
put a line in the sand. That's when you say, you know what, this is too much. And then what do you do? Let's say your line is in the sand. Let's say somebody does drink too much at your party. We're not saying break your friendship with that person.
No.
That's the most common thing, I think, of misunderstandings with boundaries is people go, well,
like black and white.
Yeah, here's my expectation. If you do any little thing over that, you're out of my life. Yeah. And some people talk about that with a badge of honor. They're like, I can just switch it off. I don't care how long I've known you. I can cut. I'm like, that's not healthy, dude.
No.
That's not.
And that just, to me, when I hear that sounds like emotional dysregulation to the top.
Yeah.
Because that means that you can't handle stress, or you can't handle moments of tension very well, so it's easier for you to not be around them at all.
Yeah, so if anything happens that's out of your kind of narrowly defined boundaries in this case, that you just snap. You're like, nope, not dealing with it. So
it's easier for me to cut you off.
So when people have this kind of quality in their personality, they would typically struggle to have relationships.
Yes.
So they would have a history of not staying in jobs for very long because every boss they have is a shitty boss. Friends are difficult to keep. It's maybe tough to stay close to people even in your family. Yeah. Sometimes families
a lot of cutoffs
like
in the family history. So my mom doesn't talk to her sister. My grandma never talked to her brother. I don't know who my uncles are. That's also a sign of person or a family history of boundary issues.
So that's one extreme where people are cutting people off and they're not talking to each other and they can't. And just to touch on that quickly though as a sidebar, sometimes that's appropriate. Like if you know that somebody is never going to be compatible with you and every time you're around them it's tension.
Or you've discussed it and you've given 1 shot and 2 shots and 3 shots and 4 shots and things keep happening and or they get like they become more accelerated or more defiant.
Or even like really egregious things that happen. So if somebody, maybe like a hard line for me is theft. So even if you're my family, if you steal from me, that's sorry, see you later.
For me, it's violence, right? I'm
that's another good one too. If someone's getting out of control.
Yeah, I come to my house and start yelling or screaming. Or
and they're like, "Oh, sorry, I just drank too much or whatever." And then you go like, "Look,
there's
man,
no way."
Yeah, sorry, dude. I got a family, or just even if you don't have a family, it's just personally not something I'm cool with. I can't. that cannot be the mistake that you make. You can make other mistakes, and I'm okay with it. If you say something offensive,
or maybe we'll be friends. You're just not going to come over.
Yeah, anymore. And that's the thing with boundaries is there can be proportional reactions, right? Like maybe you have a family member who has an addiction and becomes violent when they, drink too much, or they do drugs before coming to a function. You can see that they're messed up when
so the
there.
Boundary is when you're messed up, you do not come in.
Yeah, like you're not excommunicating them or sending them, but you're just saying like, look, there has to be some kind of buffer here.
Yeah.
Between what I don't
it's
like.
Where I think boundaries to me sound like, hey, this is hurting me or hurting the ones I love, and I have to protect them.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good way of looking at it. So that's when people have kind of too firm of boundaries, and they can disconnect rapidly, and they don't discuss things. They have emotional intolerance. Other end of the spectrum is the mother-in-law who comes over all the time or nitpicks you, or another common one is in family businesses where the dad is head of household. This is one I've seen quite a bit. The son is maybe mid-30s. He's set to inherit the business. Dad says, yeah, it's yours. He's not taking a step back though.
So he's still running it, but
he's still running. Yeah, he's coming over. He's telling you, how to do things, and it's this constant sense of I have no space to breathe. Yeah, I can't do anything. You're all over me. So when your family has no boundaries, you can feel smothered, claustrophobic.
Or when information is shared a lot, right? So I share with one part of my family, but then the rest of the family magically that happens in my family all the time. Yeah. I tell one person, and then by 20 minutes, my whole family, like nuclear family, like my mom, my sisters, my brother, all know.
And things can get distorted when that happens. And then it comes around, why didn't you tell me that? And I'm like, well, because I
just talked to you. Why didn't you tell me that? I'm like, well, because I really just wanted to tell my sister that. I didn't want to share that with you. I have different relationships with different people, and that's okay. Yeah. I don't want to tell everybody everything. So what do you do about that? When you have a couple, especially as a common case, when one person comes in and the person whose family that is, it's not weird to them. That's how they grew up. So boundaries is definitely something that is also, Ryan mentioned Italian culture, I said Hispanic culture, that it's very much bred within our worldviews. It's just how we see the world. So
it's very invisible to you.
Yeah, like my husband's family would have no problem if we lived in the same house. All my sisters-in-laws, when they got married, lived in my mother-in-law's home for at least a year. Wow. I'm half American, right? My dad would he would turn around his grave if he found out that I am living in my in-laws' house, because that is not an American value. Independence is more of an Anglo-Saxon value, right? And I couldn't. None of us could have lived. It's interesting to hear about the independence bit, but that's so true, though. Yeah, like even when my first business failed pretty miserably, my second and my third. And so so this is the fingers crossed. But I ended up moving back home, and I wasn't that old. I was like 23 or 24 at this point, but it was a big blow. Like living with my in Anglo-Saxon culture, you kind of leave when you're 18, 19, when you go to school.
As soon as you're legal, almost, in many cultures, at least within Canada. Here in Ontario, it's a little different. People, like I have friends who are, approaching 30 or even early 30s, and they live at home, or at least partially at home, and they have a roommate they go and stay with sometimes. But in Alberta, in the West, much more independent. Yeah, if you're not out at 18, you're a loser.
Well, my dad was one of 4, and all of them left home when they went to college and never came back. We're 4. I'm a family. I have 3 other siblings, and all of us went to college, and none of us came home. But in my husband's family, where there's 5, they all left when they got married. So they finished college, some got master's degrees, came home. That makes more sense to me economically. Like you're going to start your life in a much better position, but that's a tough thing to deal with. And so when you have a spouse who's coming from maybe one of those cultures where there's not boundaries to you, and maybe they think your family is really weirdly cold and distant. You guys don't tell each other anything. Yeah. So what happens when people are in that kind of pattern is there's rarely compromise. It mostly turns into my way's right, your way's wrong. Yes. And then people just sit there and so that's called the power struggle phase. And we talked about that in our first episode, how there's this power struggle and then you're both kind of competing with these different values. And one of 2 things will happen. So either you become more and more upset and gridlocked. And then eventually you will probably either be unhappy or you separate because you're like, we're not compatible. Can't handle it anymore. Just not going to work. We're just not compatible on this level. Or you come to a compromise. You realize you take off kind of your glasses, of your worldview and go, well, look, this is how I do things and how I like them. Well, let me understand yours.
But maybe you don't do them the same way. Let's understand each other. And you can come up with some kind of balance. Now, it's never going to be perfect.
And I think that And me and my husband have done that several times, just because even though we are very similar culture-wise, I am half American, so I do have a lot of Anglo-Saxon values. So I would never live in my in-laws, for example, or I don't like that dropping by. You need to call me and ask me if you can come. And what we did a lot was talk about what value is held within that worldview. So why was it important that his family could come and drop by whenever they wanted? Yes. What value is that? And that's closeness. He said that it was like freedom, that it showed that we were just one big happy family, and that my house is their house and their house is my house. So then we try to find different ways where we can have that same value without the dropping by without notice.
And so we went through that same process too. Everybody does, but the key thing is you ask the explorative question.
Yes.
What about this is important? If you get to what Carrie was just talking about, well, dropping by means to me this. When you go the surface level, it's just what I think, and this has to be done because it's what I say. It's not about dropping by. It's about feeling connected or feeling valued or feeling
or part of
united.
Belonging. If they drop by everyone else but don't drop off my house, that means that we don't belong to that family structure.
Yeah, and it can be very anxiety inducing too.
Yeah,
because if this is what you've known your whole life, and suddenly your spouse is going like, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore. You got to change this." It can set off a lot of really negative feelings. Yeah. So you talk about it. What does this mean to you? What does this mean to me? And then you talk about how can I get this in a different way, which is exactly so. You clearly did you do that because you knew to do that, or is that just naturally you stumbled into the?
I don't think I knew. No, I knew a little bit about having to find the value within. Like I needed to know what was behind it.
Yeah. So you're kind of subtly thinking there in your head, like, okay, how do I solve this?
Yes. Yeah. I needed to find a way that we could both be comfortable, because for me, and I told him my value of not dropping by is that I don't get to have a nuclear family. I'm just this extension of this
loss of autonomy.
Yeah, I lose who my family is enmeshed in this big other family, right? And when he understood that, he's like, "Oh, okay, I do want you to feel like you have your family and that you're the mom, not my mom," right? So, and that then we were able to figure it out, and
that's probably like I'd say the single most common boundary issues in couples is the wife feeling infringed upon by the mother-in-law. I hear it. I would say if I'm talking about the couples that come in with that.
Or vice versa, not because the mother-in-law infringes on the son's life, but the mother infringes on the daughter's life.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the mother-in-law comes over and daughter-in-law, right?
Or even her own mother.
Oh, biological.
So my mom comes and kind of wants to run my house.
Oh, okay, you're talking like an archetype of like a critical mom.
Like mom. I think the hardest boundary to do is with mother-in-law or your own mother.
Because they also feel much more like a boundary or a change is a rejection. So sometimes too, this bleeds into family therapy where let's say that you have a couple and the wife of the couple is saying mother-in-law is too busybody. She comes over all the time.
She tells me what to do. She's telling me how to raise my kids.
And then you talk to the couple and they agree and you explore with them and the couple is now united. They're doing well together. The next issue is mother-in-law. How do we enforce this? She feels like her son has betrayed her. She feels like she has been pushed out. She is not accepted or appreciated. Sometimes that can cause a rift, and very often that's the reason why within these families, especially when it's the son, the male figure who has that kind of family dynamic, they don't want to say anything because they don't want to hurt feelings.
And they don't want to lose, right? They don't want to lose their mother. They don't want to lose their family structure.
It can be so tough.
It's scary.
So then you have to sometimes do a session with mom, bring her in and be like, look, this is not about rejection. Why do you feel this way? And very often they say, well, I raised my boy. I've been doing this 30 years. She comes along and suddenly, I'm not welcome in my own son's home. And they have this very attacked feeling. Oh yeah, their narrative is I have been ostracized and unfairly treated and I'm not appreciated. I'm just trying to help.
Loved.
I'm not loved is a big one. Yeah, there's so much pain. Betrayal and pain is probably the two most common. So boundaries can be very difficult no matter which side of the spectrum you're on.
They're hard.
But
they're all over. They're with your spouse, they're with your friends, they're with your workplace, they're with your mother, your father, everyone.
And we didn't even, we could talk about this for hours, but we can go into boundaries on, self-indulgence, like boundaries around spending money. A budget is just a way
within
of
yourselves.
Money. Boundaries
diet.
Nutella.
Diet.
R.I.P. Nutella in Carrie's life.
Diet, spending, anything. Drinking,
Yeah. Boundaries and substance use is a big one too. Everybody struggles with those here and there. So there's so many. like the way you solve it is the same really across the board. Is you figure out what is the behavior that needs to be regulated, what about changing that may bother me or bother the other person that I'm dealing with, and when I'm trying to approach them, am I exploring what it means to them, or am I just saying you're bad, you're wrong?
Yeah, am I classifying this person
I'm
because of their
labeling
behavior,
them or attacking them.
Yeah.
So stay away from that. Ask them, okay, look, I get that we have this disagreement, but I don't understand why this is so important to you. What does it mean to you?
Please explain it to me.
Yeah.
And can we find another way to get you that same value?
Yeah, and sometimes people will be a little defensive at first because if maybe you've had a conflict around boundaries, and so you're listening to this podcast or you're watching our video on YouTube, and now you're going, okay, well, that makes sense. I'm going to try approaching this in a different way. The person that you have the boundary issue with may be so conditioned that this is a battle.
Hot topic.
That as soon as you bring it up, they go into battle mode.
Yeah, they get defensive.
Don't be alarmed and try not to succumn to that and go, okay, well, I'm trying to be nice. Here you are firing at me, so I'm going to fire
I'm trying
back.
to understand. Please help me understand.
Look, I get it. We've historically been heated, but I'm trying to talk about it. I don't want to keep having this issue with you. We're family, maybe, or we're friends, and this is not something I want to come between us. How do we figure this out? Talk to me here. And the other person has to be willing to.
Of course.
So you have to, again, going back to kind of meta boundaries, when there are people who are not reciprocating what you're doing, they're not talking to you, not understanding with you, not doing anything like that.
That's, I think, when we're on the other side, where maybe a cutoff is prudent, just because I'm trying to talk about this. I tried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, how many times, and I'm still not able to achieve this, and this is hurting me or hurting the people I love, then maybe a cutoff is warranted, right?
Yeah, so this is one, I mean, I would be really interested if anybody has situations that they want us to break down or take a look at. Please feel free, ryanswers.com/podcast. Leave us a comment.
It can be too. We won't,
send a message. And we can anonymize your scenario. We won't reveal any personal information. We can just talk about it a little bit. Or even if you want to give us a shout, the contact page, same, ryanswers.com/contact, and you'll be able to send us a message or even call me and we can talk quickly and put your scenario on our next episode, do a little bit of a breakdown. Before we wrap up, I know this is kind of a quick one today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? I
would like you guys to understand that boundaries are a way of taking care of yourselves. Like it's a message of love, really. I know it's really hard to understand it that way, but even if you you and your partner are fighting over boundaries with your family or mother-in-law or father-in-law, whoever, really the two people are fighting because they care, because they love, right? So I'm trying to protect our nuclear family. You're trying to protect your extended family because we love them, not because I want to piss you off, not because, right? And even that within myself, right? So if I put this boundary of not spending this money, that is a way I show myself self-love, because I want this money for a greater good, or I want this, whatever, the wage or whatever you're trying to achieve. So they're really more of a sign of protection, love, taking care of someone, taking care of yourself. They're not something that is out there just to bother others. Yeah, you're not just being controlling. No. That's a big thing. You're so controlling with these boundaries. What's your issue? No, it's a way of taking care of yourself and others that you love. And it doesn't mean you're incompatible either. Like, no two people are going to be perfectly in sync. So this is a very normal part of a relationship. Even if you're in the same culture, same religion, same age level, you'll still have boundary issues. Yeah, even, I mean, when we're talking about siblings, like you could have identical twins who grew up, they could still have a different sense of boundaries. So it doesn't mean you're incompatible. It's normal, and it's an important part of long-term relationships. You will never be able to sustain a long-term relationship if you don't know how to navigate when you have conflicting boundaries about an issue. Yeah, for sure. So that's everything, guys. If you like our show, please rate us on the platform you're listening to. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We're back every Thursday with a new topic, and we will see you guys again. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Take care.